So, according to these notes I took several years ago, you flew the A1 Skyraider, the AD, the A3D Skyknight, the F2H Banshee, the F9F Cougar, F7U Cutlass.
I flew the F9F Panther.
Oh, Panther, not Cougar.
Cougar was the F9F6.
Okay.
The Panther was the F9F4.
Okay.
The straight wing version. The Cougar was the swept wing version.
Yeah. And it was a very good looking airplane, the Cougar. The F7U Cutlass and the SNB Twin Beach. And you were developing instrument training procedures.
I was going to tell you about the SNB. Reminds me of that part of Atlantic City. Actually, I'd been there a month or two, having come in World War II from night fighters, and they had every squadron had to have an instrument instructor, and they didn't have one at that time. So when I got there, they made me said, "You're going to be the instructor," and sent me to Corpus Christi for an instrument instructor program, and so went down there and flew the SNB for I don't know how long that program was, at least 2 months, I don't know, and obtained a lot more practice and procedure for instrument flying, and then went back to Atlantic City and served as their instrument instructor there for the squadron for the rest of the time I was there, which is kind of a bad deal for me because the main people I flew with were these high-ranking people, admirals and down from Washington, who can't get their flight time. They wanted to fly the SNB, and they would get in the left seat. Sometimes they couldn't fly for beans, but they'd get in the left seat, and all I could do was get in the right seat and hush, you know. And then they would try to demonstrate their airplane and sometimes instrument proficiency, and they were very poor at it, and you couldn't do much instructing, but you try to keep them tearing up the airplane. Some of them could do fine, that's an exaggeration, but there were a lot of them that sure couldn't do very much. But it was a kind of a diplomatic job, I would say, because I had to get them through their hours so they get their pay and still not offend them. It was tough. So that was a big part of Atlantic City for me.
So on these jets, they were the first generation jets, you might say. Anything come to mind of that's might be interesting to hear about the jets, maybe what they were like, or whether one was better than the other? You know, the Cutlass has a pretty bad reputation, but I'm not sure that it's accurate or not. But
it's accurate.
Is it? So tell us about some of those.
Well, the Cutlass had two items that come to mind. One is that in flying it, it had a red light on the side panel that comes on. It means the CG is not within the range, and the range was about 1 inch wide.
Wow.
Because of that tailless configuration. And so if that red light came on, the instruction to the pilot was bail, eject right now. And so that was a pretty touchy thing. It had a bunch of tanks and had an automatic system to shift the fuel around between tanks by CG, and you knew how to do that. But if that malfunctioned, that light came on, you had to get out of there. And another thing about it was because of the tailless arrangement and being a nose wheel airplane, it had a 13-foot telescoping nose gear.
Yeah.
It's really tall, and so it sits on the ground very nose up. It's a delta wing airplane has to have a high angle attack to get the lift. So they were that way. But so the result of that is that if you landed wheels up, all the wheels up, the tail's going to hit way down here, and the nose is going to bang down very hard. So everybody knew that if you made the wheels up, you're going to break your back. You get jammed down in the seat so hard. And so a good friend of mine, Ed Jackson, is a very important fellow in my life. Came into the field one day and was on final, and somebody else landed in front of him or something and stopped on the runway, and Tower made him go around. I can't remember the details of why he went around, but anyhow, somebody in front of him didn't clear the runway or something. I know it made Ed mad anyhow, lost his temper, and he powered on real quick and went around, and getting mad coming around, real quick, he forgot to put the gear back down. He put it up and put it back down. He just plain forgot the gear. And he landed wheels up and landed the cherry picker, which is a big tractor thing with a crane on it and a sling, came out to pick up the airplane, and he wouldn't get out of the seat. They were trying to get him out of the seat, and he wouldn't budge. He said, "Well, the cherry picker gets here." When he got there, he said, "Get that thing, strap me in, because I broke my back, and I don't want to move." And he was smart enough to know that right then. And they wanted to get him out, and he wouldn't budge. And so they got cherry picker, got him out and took him to the hospital, and the doctor told him that if he had tried to get up, he'd have killed himself right there.
Wow.
Severed his spinal nerve because his back was broken bad. Ed is very, very important to me because he's the guy, I don't know if you remember this story at all, but they made a movie about a Korean situation where a pair of airplanes flew down between two valleys and flew down low in a bombing run or some kind of strafing, I don't know. And they had stretched cables across the valley. Do you remember that story at all?
Is this the one where he was blinded?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, in the real case, in the movie, they reversed the roles and just ruined the story. But anyhow, in the real case, Ed was the leader and had a wingman who was his first flight in Korea. So he didn't know the area at all and was a junior guy. So Ed went down, and Ed wasn't too smart. He wouldn't gone down into it and hit that cable, but he did. And it came up the nose of the F9. It was an F9F. And one came up the nose and hit the canopy and shattered the canopy and got all the glass in his face. And another cable went down below the nose and got about almost back halfway back to the wing, and then bit into the fuselage and cut back in, almost cut the wing off. It got a little further, cut the wing right off the airplane, but it stopped right there and broke the cable. So that didn't, all the damage to the airplane was just, the significant damage was the windshield shattered. Well, Ed made another mistake. He knew better, and he had not put his goggles down. And the rule in combat is always put your goggles down because it'll save your eyes in case of fire explosion.
Now, this was the novice that flew into it, right? Not Ed?
No, that's Ed.
Ed?
That's
Okay.
Ed. The novice I'll get to in a minute. I didn't know the story yet. He was following. He didn't hit the cable or anything. He was just following Ed. And so Ed didn't have his goggles on. The glass cut his face. He had a real bad cut. He had several cuts around his face. He had a real bad cut. Let's see, I'll get it right. I think it was, and from about the middle of his head right here, this way, and down the side right here. He had this big piece of skin that's about that big as your hand there. They just folded down right over his eye. And there were a lot of little glass slivers in the air before that happened, and it was all in his face and his eyes, both eyes. That came down and was bleeding. Scalp bleeds terrible, and his blood was just running all over his face. And he, from that moment to the rest of the story, on board the carrier, he didn't bat his eyes, didn't blink, not once. The doctor told him on the operating table if he'd have batted one time, he'd have scraped those glass all through his eyes and ruined his eyes. It didn't have a scratch. Didn't bother his vision at all after that. But anyhow, that happened, and fortunately, as he hit it, he was in a high-speed pitch-up mode, and he just apparently just, I have to assume now that he just held what he had, and the airplane lifted up and was climbing way up, and by the time he got way up here in time, he was getting slowed down. He had time to communicate to his wingman, and he told him that he was blinded, and what was his pitch attitude and wing attitude, and the wingman told him he was nose up, so he nosed down. He said, down more, and he came down, up. That's the way wingman was talking to him all the time, telling him where his nose was. And the wings the same way. And right wing down or left wing down, something like anyhow, they got it stabilized. And Ed's not blinking his eyes now, but he's talking on the radio to this guy. And he's told the guy, wingman said, look around and see what you see. And the guy described to him what he'd see on the ground. Ed says, okay, we need a heading of 120 degrees or whatever it is. Said, turn it to 120 degrees. So this guy could see his compass, and he'd tell Ed, wing down, a little more, a little less bank, more bank, whatever. And they turned around to that heading, and the guy says, roll out, and they flew that way and got back to the ship. I don't know how far off in the ocean it was, but it was probably, they usually launched from 250 miles out. So something like that. They got back to the ship, and they told the ship their situation, the Ed's situation, blinded, and so the wingman flew him down by the ship, and down to altitude, got him ahead of the ship, and turned around. I'm sure bigger than normal, gave him more room to turn and everything. Came around, and the LSO on the ship then, who, like all LSOs in those days, knew Ed personally and his habits and everything. And the LSO got on the radio and talked to Ed and told him wing up, nose down, more power, less power. Just talked to him all the way around, and got him in position, told him to cut, and Ed landed right. I've seen the movie of this, the real one, not the Hollywood movie. He landed right in the middle of the deck, just a perfect landing. You couldn't do a better landing. And they came with a cherry picker then off the ship and got him out of the cockpit and carried him down to sick bay and cleaned his eyes out very carefully. And that's when he first could see and bat his eyes. He had not batted his eyes that whole time. However long, it probably took 2 hours or something like that.
So, and not only did he do an amazing thing, which is to even land an airplane on a carrier, but he did so blind after flying all the way back. Did Ed tell you this story personally?
Yep.
Okay. The movie, which if I remember right, was The Fighting Lady.
Yeah.
And it was James Michener's
No,
book.
it wasn't The Fighting Lady. That was a World War II movie.
Oh, that's
This was a Korean movie in
That's
color.
right.
And it was Van Johnson
Yeah.
was the wingman. Let me get this straight now. Van Johnson was the wingman,
Right.
and Van Johnson was the leader, and I can't remember now. I'm confused.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the guy went through the wires and got blinded. All right, but Van Johnson had to be the wingman.
Yeah.
Because Van Johnson then talked to him back to the ship.
Yeah.
Talked him around the land and made the wingman the hero,
Yeah.
which is just backwards. Just ruined the story to me. But very, very strong. Yeah, Ed was the one that had become my friend in VX3. Though he was there before I got there. He had been to Korea.
And this was after. I mean, this incident happened before you.
Yeah, yeah. He had gone through the hospital for months and got back into flying. Came on up to VX3, and as I got acquainted with him, we ended up living in an apartment complex, and our doors were right opposite each other, so we were good friends right there.
Was the name of that movie The Fighting Lady?
No, that was a World War II movie. It was the movie that we were talking about. Something else. I can't remember it. It's in the Navy.
I just saw that movie here in the last
find it.
month. Can't remember what it was.
But it goes around. Yeah, it's a pretty good movie.
Let me take a
Except
check
for
on
me,
it.
that's in the guy that's blinded, just hollering, "Oh, I can't make it! I can't!" And that didn't happen. That sort of thing, you know. So I didn't like that part of it. But then, Ed, I was going to tell you that Ed was the one there in Atlantic City that actually I'd been there a little while and flying the ADs, a piston airplane. I had never flown a jet at that time, and Ed was the one that checked me out in the F9F then, and got me flying jets.
Those were they kind of underpowered generally?
That was the talk in latter days, but I didn't feel that way about it then. The only thing that represented that idea is that everything about the handbook and anybody checking out and everything is telling you that compared to piston propeller airplanes, it's going to take a very slow acceleration and a long run on the ground. And so if you made an approach on the go around, you had to get the power on early. You couldn't wait till you hit the ground, then put on power and go around in a jet.
And of course, on a carrier, they had to be steam launched.
Say that again?
On a carrier, they had to be steam launched.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah, they were all steam launched in those days. And, that was all I was going to say about the checkout in the jet gave you the comparison view that they were very underpowered for takeoff, but once you were flying, they certainly weren't underpowered to me, because you could hit 400, 500 knots indicated airspeed in a hurry.